those commitments was done way like prior before the incident. Those, deposits was paid, and and it was either a refund back the money and funds and things like that.
All arrows now point to the new evidence. That evidence says that Melly was betrayed. And to top it all off, 100K Track spoke up about YNW Melly. He gave his 2 cents about whether or not he could have done the crime. Melly's reaction was unexpected, to say the least. So as y'all know by now, YNW Melly's trial is well on the way, and the guy is facing some serious stuff. They're saying he murdered 2 of his buddies. Jamel Maurice Devons, aka YNW Melly, said he's not guilty. But if they find him guilty of first-degree murder, he might be staring at the death penalty. In the opening arguments, his lawyer, David Howard, went all out, calling the state's investigation incompetent and incomplete. He's basically saying they got nothing on his client. No reason for him to do his friends like that. But the prosecutors rolled out their case from way back in 2019. They're claiming YNW Melly shot and killed his buddies YNW Juvie and YNW Sack Chaser, and then tried to make it look like a drive-by shooting. They even brought in some surveillance footage showing YNW Melly, his co-defendant YNW Bortland, and the victims all hanging out in a car. Prosecutors say this happened right when YNW Bortland said the shooting went down. They're also pointing to phone data, blood spatter evidence, and a bullet casing found in a car to back their claims. And get this, they played audio of YNW Bortland talking to a detective, spinning the tale of the supposed drive-by shooting. The detective was like, nah, no evidence of that at the location you're talking about, bro. Multiple crime scene investigators took the stand, talking about sweeping the car YNW Melly and YNW Bortland supposedly used for their drive-by setup. The defense grilled them, saying fingerprints they collected might not be seen by the naked eye, but that not all the items were DNA tested. They even caught one investigator slipping, not changing gloves when handling different evidence. A bit of a contamination risk, don't you think? Then there were witnesses who were all about the shell casings. But hold up, they still haven't found the actual gun. So the defense was playing it cool because they know that the gun for which the crime was committed was never found. Then they brought in Felicia Holmes, a nurse, and claimed her daughter, Mariah Hamilton, was dating YNW Melly at the time of the murders. They tried to twist her words up, saying that she lied to the cops and everything. The defense was not happy and called for a mistrial. As expected, their request was denied. After a few days' arrest, the YNW Melly murder case is back in the spotlight, and it's bringing all the drama with it. Looks like we're in for yet another month of this crazy roller coaster. Okay, so there's this dude named Trevon Glass, who used to make beats for YNW Sack Chaser. He talked to the court about what really went down at the studio that night, and he made it very obvious that he was not happy sitting there and telling his side of the story, even though he volunteered to testify.
Did you smoke before you came here today?
I did not.
I have nothing.
I should have.
During the hearing, Trayvon revealed that they had this insane 12-hour recording session booked at the studio. Although that sounds lit in theory, in practice, they couldn't handle the marathon. They started getting tired and sleepy, and that's what happens when you're burning the midnight oil. So they left the studio super late at night, and that's when things got real crazy. Glass, the producer, spilled all the details about what he saw in the studio surveillance tapes. Picture this: Melly and Fredo Bang, another rapper, hopped into a Jeep Compass and a red Mitsubishi. You won't believe it, the prosecutors really wanted Fredo to testify, but he straight up said that he's not going to turn up under any circumstances. More about that in a minute. Getting back to the topic at hand, after the studio session, Glass and his crew hit Melly's place and then swung by Fredo's crib to mourn their fallen buddies. But here's where it gets juicy. Glass noticed that Melly had changed his clothes since the recording session earlier that night. Suspicious much?
Yeah.
Was Melly wearing the same clothes or different clothes than when you saw him at the studio?
It was a new day. Nah, he wasn't.
Nah, he wasn't. You guys
Wasn't wearing the same clothes.
Okay. Do you recall what he was wearing?
Just had on some shorts.
Okay.
But when they tried to dig into what happened at Fredo's, Glass pulled a mute, not telling the prosecutors a goddamn thing. Smart move. He claimed he was too lost in grief to spill the beans. The real question here is, why the hell would both Melly and Bortland change their clothes and waste a good 40 minutes cruising around instead of rushing to the hospital to check on their injured friends? Something ain't adding up here. Innocent people don't act like that, man. It's like they're playing hide and seek with the truth. Fishy stuff, I'm telling you, super fishy. Alright, so for a little bit more about the Fredo Bang involvement in the YNW Melly case. During the pre-trial conference, Fredo didn't spill the beans about what he knows regarding the events surrounding YNW Melly's double murder trial. He pulled out all the big guns, citing attorney-client privilege and the good old Fifth Amendment right to avoid self-incrimination, so the judge just shut down the prosecution's motions to force him to talk. According to the prosecution, they believe Melly called Fredo right after the murders went down, but Fredo ain't giving up any info. They wanted to grill him about that night, where he was during the killings, if he picked Melly up as claimed, and details about the people at his place on the night of the shooting. But Fredo was like, nah, I ain't saying a word. And check this out, the state even offered him immunity from prosecution in Florida if he spilled the beans, but still no dice. Fredo's lawyer, Tamika Davis, made it very clear that Fredo's just a witness in the case, not a suspect. He's all about exercising his right to remain silent. And hey, they're hoping for a fair outcome in the resolution of Melly's case. But back at the courtroom, they had this whole discussion about the phones and where they were at the time of the shooting. Break it all down, they brought in this detective dude, Mark Moretti, who's been all over this case like a hawk. Prosecution's on a mission, trying to link Melly to the car where they say the crime happened. Guess what? They got some new ammo to fire at him. They're doing their best to get an accurate estimate on the phone's location. But here's the catch though, it's all based on those phone tower records. And you know how that goes, right? It's not like they can tell with perfect precision where Melly was at the time that he was using what the prosecutors believe is, quote, his phone. Because of that, the defense came in swinging, questioning all the accuracy of the data, just like they did in the past. They're going to exploit every weakness that they find. That's their job anyway. So during the trial, Detective Moretti revealed where the phones that Melly and the gang used were found. YNW Juvie's phone was on the back floorboard of the right passenger rear. The second one reveals that Sack Chaser's phone was 100 meters away from the shell casings, while Melly's phone was 400 meters away. CDR records, aka call detail records, were flying around because they had this expert explaining all those columns to show how it's relevant to the case. Pretty crucial stuff, really. Now here's where it gets even juicier. They started talking about Fredo because he was in touch with Melly right before and after everything went down with Juvie and Sack. Melly even went to Fredo's place on the morning of the murders, and Sack's producer, Glass, confirmed it too. The prosecutor had more tricks up her sleeve, bringing up a Western Union receipt with Melly's phone number and name on it. Solid evidence that the phone was his and not someone else's. But then things got a little bit confusing. They started diving into various phone data points, and let's be real here, it's hard to keep up with all the details. The juries might have been scratching their heads at the time because it didn't seem directly related to the main point that the prosecutor was making. But it wasn't just Fredo's messages causing a stir. They were going all out with messages and phone numbers flying around between Melly and all sorts of people, even big names. But they were on a mission, no doubt, connecting all those dots and figuring out what's what. Let me tell you, there's some real family drama going on too. Melly and his mom were like fire and ice, always at odds and not holding back against each other. But wait, it gets even crazier. Juvie's sister started making threats towards Melly's mom, and now she's got herself a bodyguard. There are even more messages that'll make you go, did Melly really do the unthinkable? Seriously, it's got us all wondering. Turns out there was some serious beef among the rappers, and the jurors got a taste of it just a week ago. Melly was pretty ticked off because his fellow rappers were getting all the cash and credit for his creative input on their work. They showed some of the text messages in court going back and forth between Melly and Sack Chaser, revealing that they weren't all buddy-buddy. The defense lawyers tried to argue that the messages weren't legit, but Judge John Murphy let the jurors hear about how Detective Mark Moretti built the case, pointing to Melly as the one behind the murders. Those messages might just be the key to the motives for the killings. In one, from August of 2018, we can clearly see that Melly was thinking. He was not going to be playing along with YNW if he didn't get the flow, recognition, and most importantly, payment that he deserved. He wanted credit for his creative genius. Then Sack replied saying he'd always repay Melly for his help and ideas, that they were like brothers. However, in another message, Melly asked about the whereabouts of something he called Phi, which they think might be code for a weapon. Sack mentioned it was in a shoebox in his closet. Now, these messages don't directly prove Melly had a gun during the murders. The defense hasn't even had a chance to grill Moretti yet, but here's where things get real messy. In a conversation with his mom, Melly had the nerve to call her a B-word. Not a very good look for old Melly for sure. The messages made the defense call for a mistrial, but the judge wasn't having it. He shut it down real quick, saying those messages were unrelated to the case.
Hey, motion to that.
Some people are scratching their heads because the prosecutor didn't explicitly tie the messages to something incriminating. But hey, actions speak louder than words, right? And these messages say a lot about what's going on behind the scenes. Some people think these messages were super important to consider in the grand scheme of things. What happened like a no motive case is slowly turning into something bigger. The texts were showing that there was some serious drama going on behind the scenes between Melly, Sack Chaser, and Melly's mom. The very last update on Melly's case that came in just a few days ago was his manager talking about Melly in the trial. He gave us his 2 cents on this drama, and he did raise awareness about something quite interesting. As you may have heard, YNW Melly's manager, Jameson Francois, aka 100K Track, spoke up about this whole situation. According to 100K Track, they got it all wrong, and Melly ain't no murderer. 100K Track is saying that they got the wrong person. He's got some background info on the rapper and it's pretty confident in his beliefs, so the plot's just thickening, and the manager is putting it all out there loud and clear. First, Track spoke about the night of the incident, and he himself couldn't really recall if they were chilling at Melly's or Fredo's house after Sack and Juvie got murked. He went on to say,
Or Fredo house, honestly, because it was so long ago. But I remember his family was at his house, we went to his house too, so it was like a little bit, everybody was a little bit in different places and things like that. I don't remember exactly where I met him, but because I did go to both houses, so I really don't.
Now, that's a little sus. If everyone was in such disbelief and grief, you'd expect people to remember the hours after the tragedy quite well, but it is what it is. Then Melly's manager felt like he needed to clear the air out about what happened in the very next day after the tragic night. See, Melly was filming a video from one of his songs that day, and he had to pull up to the video shoot because it was an early commitment from his side, something that he had to go through with. The manager said,
those commitments was done way prior before the incident. Those, deposits was paid, and it was either A, refund back the money and funds and things like that, or B, do what he got to do and just man up and do it. And he was able to pull himself together and get it done. But the whole day, man, it was a very sad day. Like, you could tell the atmosphere was down. His energy was down. He was trying to pick himself back up, trying to block it and just be professional and do what he got to do. But you could tell he was hurting really bad.
Now, it's funny that he would say how this video shoot had to be done and that Melly was only keeping it, quote, professional, when Melly himself didn't turn up to a show one time only because he was having a haircut. The manager knows best, right? Lastly, he was also asked about the possibility of Melly being threatened by someone who wanted him out of the picture. If you ask Track, in all likelihood, Melly was a target, and he was said that most people in this line of business are a target at some point, including himself. It happens to everyone.
When you in the limelight and you're making money and things like that, you're gonna receive hate, you're gonna receive death threats, you're gonna receive things from everywhere, from people people you don't know, people who probably feel obligated or feel entitled to things, people who might not even know you from the campaign and just don't like you. So as an entertainer, your life is always being threatened by somebody or someone.
Some people on the internet were not really convinced, man. One person said, sounds like this man had a lot of explaining to do. First King Von, and now this Melly trial. I'm surprised that the courts haven't announced that he's been offered some kind of deal, but it might come up in Portland's case this October. This case is sad all around, praying for those families and the judge/jury. At the end of the day, guilty or not guilty, everyone loses. Another person wrote, this guy is delusional if he thinks Melly is innocent. But what y'all think about the recent developments with the manager speaking up? And do you think Melly is innocent? Let us know what you think down in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching to the very end. If you like this video, be sure to click like, comment, subscribe to the channel. And as always, remember to keep it RIZZLE.